Hello and welcome to Glyndwr Question Time, which is part of the University's Staff Springboard Conference. My name is Graham Park and I'm here to host a panel on the future of research at Glyndwr University. So first of all, let me introduce you to the panel. To my left, I've got Professor Richard Day, who's the Pro Vice Chancellor of Research. On the far left, Professor Alex Shepley, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Art, Science and Technology. To his right, we've got Professor Sue Liggett, who's the Associate Dean for Research in the same faculty. On my right, I've got, I've got mixed up here. I've got Simon Stewart, the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Life Sciences, and on his right is Professor Mandy Robbins, who's the Associate Dean for Research in the same faculty. So welcome everyone to the panel. Let me start first of all with you, Richard. Can you explain to us what the acronym Rdaps is, which I see a lot in emails? Why is obtaining Rdaps important to the university?
So Rdaps stands for Research Degree Awarding Powers. So when we first made the university, we had degree awarding powers. So our undergraduate qualifications are issued by the university, but our postgraduate research qualifications are issued by another university. And what we're looking to do is to get those powers for ourselves. And the reason for that is a couple of fold. First of all, it demonstrates the progress of the university since it was formed. So it's like a milestone, and you can compare it to your driving test, at which point you're once you've passed that, you're free to go out and drive on your own. It doesn't mean that you're an advanced driver, but it means that you're safe to go out and can be trusted, we hope, on the road. So it's the same with Rdaps. It's a critical point in the development of the university. And then there are other benefits as well. So at the moment, when our postgraduate students apply or they progress through their courses, one of the things that happens is that we process their paperwork, do what we need, but then we have to pass it on to another university. And so that puts delays in. And the other thing, of course, is that we have to pay the other university for the privilege. So we would save that money by having our own research degree awarding powers.
So how do you go about getting those? What's the process to change from being accredited by someone else to doing it ourselves? What's the process?
So there are 4 metrics that you have to prove that you pass. So the first one is that you have to show that, having been given taught degree awarding powers, that you're exercising them appropriately. And we know that we are because we have the QAA reviews and so on. And then there are a series of criteria which we have to meet around engagement with our professional bodies, publications and research. Then the third thing we have to do is to show that we do these things compliant with QAA Code of Practice for the professional bodies.
For those who don't know, what's the QA Code of Practice?
So QAA is the Quality
QAA. Assurance
Agency, so they're the people that oversee the quality of every university's provision.
Okay. So you must have, everyone must have a research strategy. So let's come to Alec now, Dean of Faculty of Art, Science and Technology. Your research strategy is themed around developing expertise in important areas of sustainability. What does this mean? And what would you say to researchers who feel they don't fit within this theme?
Well, developing expertise is what is part of it. But I think what we are trying to do is to create a sense of direction, a strategic sense of direction which appeals to the majority, if not everybody. And sustainability, or to put it in layman's terms, affordability and common sense is another way of putting it. So I think what we've tried to do is to create a vehicle on which everyone can sort of hang their coat, if you like. So it could be to do with sustainability in the arts, for example. So that might mean You're looking at audience, you're looking at collaborations with other sectors, for example, obviously the museum and gallery sector, but it might be also the health sector. And in science and technology, it's to do with obvious things like energy consumption and material and second life products and a whole range of things. So sustainability is hopefully something that's liberal enough for anybody to kind of find a way in. But obviously, if somebody is struggling, then we're such a small and friendly community that we would hope that the associate deans would find a way in for somebody who is maybe thinking, is it for me? But it's open to interpretation.
You say small community. Is there an advantage from a research point of view of having a small community?
Well, there are advantages and disadvantages. I mean, the advantages of being in a larger community means you've got critical mass, more thinking, more time, more resource. But on the other hand, a smaller community means there's more direct access to a more focused set of people. So there are strengths and weaknesses, or opportunities and threats, whichever way you look at it.
Okay, Simon, similar question to the one I asked Alec. Your faculty is concentrating on health and well-being. Can you tell us a little more about what that means to the university and the researchers within your faculty?
Yeah, I think just to echo some of Alec's comments, we have a broad subset of programme areas across the faculty, and within that, obviously, there are those that are working to clinical models of health, and those to social models of health, and then there are those peripheral subject areas. So, for example, are areas, for example, in sports and injury rehab, or areas in sports science itself, all feature in terms of health as a broad subset, but by aligning it behind that theme, it gives us a little bit of critical mass in terms of our research capacity, something that maybe is a little bit beyond some of the smaller subgroupings if they were to approach this from the staff team that's within any one given programme team. So critical mass really important, and in terms of the idea of health as a broad subset, that helps us bring in colleagues not just from a medical model or clinical model in terms of our nursing colleagues, but also our allied health professional colleagues, and our health and wellbeing colleagues as well, those who maybe are looking at public health and mental health issues. And just to top that off, Graham, really, it doesn't just relate to human health. Looks at animal health as well, animal health and wellbeing, and the idea of animal and human interaction as well, which our colleagues based at our Northup campus and our animal studies programmes are keenly focused on.
Sticking with the same faculty, Mandy, how would having our own research degree awarding powers affect the postgraduate student experience?
In a number of ways, really. The first one, really, and Richard alluded to this, is on their student journey they do have to complete paperwork as they progress, and at the moment for them that's a two-step process. So it goes to our own research committee for approval, then it goes to our partner university for approval. So there's an obvious time delay in that for the students as well before they hear back. And that can be quite hard sometimes for them, particularly if it's something like an upgrade meeting for them, where they're waiting to hear if their outcome from transitioning from MPhil to PhD, whether they've been successful in that. So they should hear back much more swiftly than they do at the moment. At the other end of the student journey, at the moment when they have their viva, so their oral examination at the end of that process, the chair is somebody who comes from outside our institution, from our partner institution. So it's not going to be somebody who's a familiar face to them in what potentially again can be quite a stressful situation where they're having their viva examination. It will be a member of our own staff, obviously independent to the students' supervisory team, but nonetheless somebody with whom they can perhaps feel a little bit more comfortable. And I think practically that will be a helpful thing for them when they're in that situation. So yeah, so those are two distinct advantages I think they will find.
You mentioned stress there. Sue, what support is in place for researchers?
We have quite a lot of support for our researchers, and if I start off with the research office, we have Francis, who is an expert on ethics, and any member of staff can get in touch with her for guidance on the ethics process. We have also, she works very closely with Emma Harrison, who is our impact manager. And again, Emma is very open to hear from any individual members of staff about the research they're interested in, and she'll try and draw out the impacts that can yield from that project. And we have, again, in the research office, we have 2 university bid writers, so Rachel Lacey and Emma Taylor, and they will walk you through the bid writing process. They will even proofread and help you with actually write the bid, and also signpost you to Wendy Wood in the Research Finance Office, who can actually, she will determine your costs and help you with the budget. So we've got support within the Research Office, but we've also got other support through Mandy as a Research Development Tutor. So there are a number of sessions that are put on for postgraduate students, but also open to members of staff to attend. And beyond that, within the faculties, we have what we did call research strand leads, whereas in FAST, they're now known as research associates. And they are individuals that are championing research within the faculty. And they can help. You can go to them. You can also get in touch with me, and I'm very happy to have a one-to-one. Always happy to talk about research. So there's plenty of support, really.
I mean, is it fair to say for each faculty, the peer review are the first port of call, or one port of call for if you've got an idea or you want to explore the topic further?
Yes, anyone can come to either of us to discuss those topics.
And for example, when we've recruited quite a few new members of staff, so I've met with all, and Mandy has, with all those individual members of staff, and it's really nice to hear about their research and to guide them through the process of writing a research plan that every member of staff needs to, that writes. That's been very, very useful for the Rdaps data, hasn't it, Richard?
Yeah, coming back to you, Richard, what is a critical self-analysis document and what does it look like?
Okay. The critical self-analysis document basically is what you write in order to persuade the reviewers that you are fit and proper people to have research degree awarding powers. There's no prescribed format. It's up to you to decide what you want it to look like. But what it needs to cover is both proving that you've met the metrics, and then things about the postgraduate experience, the support, our processes, which other people have outlined, so that you build up a picture of the university for the reviewers, and show that we're in a position to exercise those powers sensibly, that we're safe to be left on our own.
Okay. Well, Alec, based on that, according to the Wellcome Trust in 2020, they said that 75% of researchers feel that research culture is currently being stifled. What do you say to that? And how is your faculty addressing this? And why is it important to be applying for this, going through this process when these figures say that 75% of researchers feel they're being stifled?
My first instinct is to apologise, but it's not really my fault.
Okay.
But I saw that statistic as well. It's not a nice to see, and it's quite a paradox actually that the very institutions which house and accommodate and support things like research are perceived as in some way stifling that. And I wonder sometimes whether it's something to do with the academic freedom in the mind of someone and the parameters put around that, the frameworks, if you like, around what we can and can't do. So maybe it's something to do with that. So what we're trying to do is to say that the culture is made up of individuals, and it's as a reflection of that. So things like sustainability and well-being have come from my belief is that they've come from the ground up, i.e. they've been grounded in what we've seen researchers doing, and how can we progress research into the future given who we are and where we are and what we can afford to do and what we can't afford to do. So it's really down to that decision about the direction of travel, and saying that from now on we need to start doing research in a more strategic way, the research that we want doing as two faculties and as a university, rather than being on the receiving end of ideas about research and then trying to find out whether we can accommodate it or not. So we've tried to turn that around, and that's a cultural shift. Mm-hmm. And again, we have within the two faculties we have symposia, colloquia, but we also have everyday interactions, and that goes back to the point earlier on about being a small institution. It's relatively easy to get hold of the five of us than it would be in a much bigger organisation, where it's very, very difficult, and the people who've worked in bigger organisations know that. So the culture really, it can feel stifling, and if it does, then what we can do about that is get together. We do as a faculty, we have, we call them away days, but they're seldom away from the campus, certainly these days, where we hear one another, hear about one another's stories about our research, where that's coming from, where that's going to, and that sets up interactions around the room and across the two faculties, and leads to new insights and creates more energy, and you have to keep doing that as part of the culture, but the culture is made up of the individual as part of a collective.
So basically, you're basically looking at that figure and going, let's do something about it.
Yes.
Okay, jump in faculties again. Simon, what plans do your faculty have to grow research across the facility right now?
Good question. Just actually to pick up on the end of Alex's point, actually, Graham, I was involved with a meeting this morning. Again, Alex was talking about collegiality there, about people getting together, about individuals, and about drive and determination in essence. And we were looking at collaboration across a Welsh research network for youth and community work, collaboration across universities. Again, it's individuals putting themselves out there and saying, actually, we want to make something happen here, as much as it is about facilitating that within the culture. In terms for us, it's very much about strategic alignment of impact for us, and how are we going to make that happen? Well, the idea for us in terms of growth objectives is to look at 4 institutes that are aligned to groups of staff working collectively in order to create impact within a sustained impact within a specific topic area. And as a smaller institution, that's the type of approach we need to take in order to gain that sort of collective mass that we require in order to strategically have impact outside of the organisation. So that's sort of the agenda or the approach that we're taking.
Okay, Sue, let me ask you, for staff who want to be engaged in research, why is that important?
Well, there's some very good reasons why research is important, and Richard touched on one with the Rdaps. Also, there's the Research Excellence Framework, which all universities submit their research every 5 years, and they get assessed on that. And also, another point that was touched upon this morning, the purpose of a university. So without research, we wouldn't be a university. But beyond that point, that's one reason, there's 3 other, I think, possibly more important reasons why research is important. And so the second one is that research improves our teaching. So engaging in research improves our teaching. And there's been lots of studies on this, and it's known as the research teaching nexus. And if we can articulate the different ways that engaging research can benefit our teaching, just to pick out 3 ways, So the findings of our research can inform our teaching, and for example, in the humanities department, the staff edit a journal called Denbighshire Transactions, so it's on local history, and I'm sure that their experience of that feeds into their teaching. Another reason is that engaging in research gives us research skills, so it teaches us how we can think critically, how we can be ethically responsible. So these are the skills that we need to pass on to our students. Another reason is that we can engage students in data collection. So example where I've done this is that I've been approached by Arts Council Wales to evaluate a project that's placing artists in community groups that are addressing mental health. And we have a master's programme in arts and health, so we've got one of the students going there to take some field notes that they'll bring back to inform the evaluation that we're doing on those projects. So that's number 2. My third reason is that our strategy says that we engage in research that transforms. And so a very good reason for doing research is for the public good. And the director of the Crick Institute said that research enhances our culture and civilization and can be used for the public good. And this is where brings us back to the idea of having sustainability as our goal. And there's some, if you look at the United Nations sustainability goals, they're very broad. I think there's 17 of them. And you can probably pick out for every research project that we've got in the university, probably addresses one of those goals. So some examples in FAST are we've got climate action. Mm-hmm. So we've got a project on sustainable housing involving built environment, engineering and computing students. We've got affordable clean energy project on aircraft electric propulsion. We've got decent work, so media production looking at decent work, which is also very pertinent post-COVID, particularly with the arts subjects. Another of the goals is reducing inequalities, so I'm sure in all our teaching we look at the kind of colonial issues and diversity. Black Lives Matters is part of all our teaching. And finally, just another example is health. So we've got projects centred around patient-centred design, computational neuroscience. We've got digital devices for health. So that's number 3. And I'm going to go on. I've got
All right.
2. A final one is that I think that the research is important for personal reasons, because we're all curious. Being academics, we're naturally curious, and it's an opportunity to be creative. And personal experiences can actually illuminate more general subjects. And we've all got a passion or something we're interested in. Graham, you're a world-class DJ.
Yeah. Allegedly, yeah.
Founder of the rave club scene in the 1980s. Who'd have thought that you would have been involved in an Arts and Humanities Research Council project looking at the history of club culture?
Well, hopefully.
You know, we've all got something that we're actually passionate about.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's this is a new area to me to do research, but I'm researching something I'm passionate in, and I think that helps.
Yeah, I think it's what we do. We've all got something that we do that we can actually create research from. It's not something that we decide we're going to research this. It's what we do day to day, and it grows out of that.
You mentioned there the teaching research nexus. Does anyone want to expand on what that is? Anyone? Alec, maybe? The
It-
Teaching Research Nexus?
It's I've got it written down here actually.
Okay.
I have to read it to you so I get it right. The Teaching Research Nexus is the dynamic interplay between a student's learning and staff research,
Right.
and it's pretty much core, and it's actually one of the reasons why a lot of us came into the game, the industry, the sector. For me, it was about more of a triple helix practice as an artist, the relationship with teaching and the way those two things fed each other and off each other and improved both. And then I started to look at it again as a phenomenon, and that's how I got into research. So the three, practice, teaching and research, started to enable some kind of generative output from seemingly everyday events and limited amounts of time that we covered earlier on. It's one of the most effective ways of actually, I think we used to call it spinning out generative processes and outcomes from something that you're involved in on a daily basis. And for me, that's how it started, because I was curious.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it made me more curious to look again, and that's what research is really. It's just looking again at something that you found interesting.
Okay, Mandy, I've got a question for you. We've just signed the Development Concordat. Why is that important? How will it help our researchers? What is it?
So it's really an international agreement, and it's designed to support a research culture within any institution that signs up to it. I think it's important that we do sign up to it and that we adhere to its principles. So to give you some practical examples of how it impacts, so think of our research assistants that we have. They're supported by the Concordat. So it very practically provides for them, for example, to have certain hours of continued professional development as part of their own professional development while they're with us. There's a lot of publicity about research assistants who are on short-term contracts traditionally, and one of the things the Concordat is set up to is support those people who are on those types of contracts to help them to prepare and think about how they get the next job or the next contract. So it's very good for that as well. It's also very useful for our graduate teaching assistants. So part of what we've done that we've wrapped up in the Concordat is we support them to gain their teaching qualification while they're with us, because while they're doing their PhD, I've heard it said they learn an awful lot about not quite so much, and it broadens that experience for them to give a much more rounded CV when they leave us. So they'll have experience of doing some teaching, they'll have experience of talking to others about their research in a public context, and it prepares them then for things like that job interview when they finish with us. So it wraps that up all very nicely into the Concordat.
Okay, I've got a question for both deans. First of all, Simon, it's a question from the audience. How is research time allocated for staff? And and adding to that, how can staff in your faculty get more involved in research and grow their own research development?
Yeah, okay, good questions. In terms of the way in which the time's allocated as part of the contract, essentially, that there's an allocation of time, 170 hours set aside for staff. In terms of how they get involved, I think the first step is talking with their line manager, looking at drafting their personal research plans, and having conversations with people like Sue, like Mandy, like others. Find someone who's maybe someone who you can mentor you, or you can ask questions of, you feel comfortable talking to about it. Those are the types of ways to get, to begin with, and understand that you bring something to the party as well. We're talking about club scenes and parties, but understand that you bring something with you. It's that sort of. I love when Sue was referring to the idea that research is transformative. The passion to transform, and if you bring that passion to transform whatever environment or industry that you're involved in, I think you create something new. And just like you would take maybe two different pieces of music and you'd blend them together and you mix them together and you'd create a new sound. You create something new as well by taking an approach to research that's about having a passion to transform.
Yes, Alec. As Simon mentioned, the contract comes into play about finding time.
Yeah.
But what if a member of staff's got a very busy teaching timetable, but they want to do research? How do they get the time into the contract there?
Well, it depends what you mean by busy. I've not met anybody at Glyndwr who was not busy. But
if you got so many hours a week,
yeah,
and then you want to research something and you get the support of whatever faculty you're in, how do you find that
well, I suppose
time?
you have to sort of be realistic about these things and tailor according to your own circumstances. I mean, the contract is one way of putting it. It's a professional contract. I like to believe that there's certain freedoms that go with that, and also accountabilities. And we mentioned support earlier on, and this may sound rather odd, but the performance development review I regard as a support mechanism. I've always approached that as my own roadmap for the year, what I was going to set out to do, and part of that was a research plan. In addition to that, we have the personal research plan, which is, again, it's a form, and I know that, not another form, but it is actually a vehicle where you can state your claim and set out your work plan for the year about what you intend to do in terms of research. And I think by doing that, you get further down that road than you would if you hadn't done that. You might not get everything, but you'll get more than you did if you hadn't done it. So in terms of the job that Simon and I do, really, it's about getting in there with the mechanics of looking at what busy means. And if there's somebody there who's got a teaching load, for example, which is imbalanced, then we'll try to do something about that. It may be something that we can't do something about in 24 hours, but once we've recognised that, we will address it. But it goes to the curriculum review and looking at whether we've got the right teaching and learning strategies in place to enable effective teaching, but also support and foster research. So that's part of the cultural mix, if you like. And I think leading by example is another way. If you're expecting this, then you should deliver yourself. And I think we do that.
Yeah, I've got another audience question here. I don't have time in my work allocation model to do research. What do I do? So presumably just go to a line manager in the first instance?
Well, again, the WAM, there's an aid memoir that goes with that. And again, whenever I've done a WAM, I take ownership of that and I complete it myself. If there is an issue with it to do with capacity over or under, then you take that to your line manager.
Richard, can I ask you the same question, the same WAM question?
Yeah, I think it really all starts with the personal research plan, because that then sets out your intentions and what you want to do. And then as a part of your professional development review, you can then talk about that and discuss it and show that you want to do something, and then get appropriate hours allocated to it.
Come back to you, Alec. A lot of the Faculty of Art, Science and Technology research is practice-based. Mm-hmm. How do you get traction for that kind of activity, and what about impact? Because, if it's something visual, for example, it might not traditionally be seen as a tangible thing.
Well, for me, practice can mean computing, it can mean engineering, it can mean sound engineering. It has a practical application already. So it's not in the abstract, it's not in the blue sky out there somewhere. And normally it's because, again, the curious academic has seen something that could be enhanced or changed or advanced. So therefore there is already an impact implicit within the approach. And for me, as a practitioner, that was my way in.
Right.
So in terms of traction, I think that shouldn't be difficult, and in terms of impact, I think that's become more and more important, and maybe it should have been more important before the REF, when the RAE was around. But it's
When the what was around?
the Research Assessment Exercise, which was the forerunner to the Research Excellence Framework.
Okay.
It's the so what question, you know. Who cares? Well, you actually need to address that before you start. Because
Okay.
you don't want to arrive at the end and everyone goes, well, we've already done that.
Got you. Simon, do you faculties ever work together? Any collaborations or cross-faculty research?
Yeah, good question. I think it's probably limited. There are probably pockets of it. Sue has maybe alluded to some of them in terms of art and health there. But I think as we progress and we move forward, there's certainly room for it to expand on, particularly where technology comes into play. And that's one of our significant focuses of the new health contract that we've won is a technology-enabled workforce. So yeah, absolutely, lots of opportunities for that going forward.
Sue, the Faculty of Art, Science and Technology have recently moved away from research strand leads to research associates. What does that mean? What does that change mean? And what will the associates be focusing on?
So we had research strand leads who were research champions, but we felt that they weren't active enough in terms of addressing some of the actions in our action plan. And it's possibly because during COVID we didn't drive research perhaps in the same way. So we've taken a fresh approach, and we're using the model that teaching and learning use with the ADT, so academic development team. So we're creating an equivalent, which we will call research enhancement team, and we'll have research associates, which are equivalent to the ADT associates, that will address particular actions from the action plan for research. So they're, as it's known as a dual operating system, so they're volunteer roles, and we're hoping that staff can be agile in working on change projects. So that's the approach we're taking, and we're calling them research associates.
Okay, Mandy, if somebody wants to become a research supervisor, what are the requirements for that, and how can the staff here start the process of becoming a research supervisor?
I think the first thing to say is if we are successful in our RDAP application, that process will actually become more simplified, and that will be another advantage to having our own research degree awarding powers. At the moment, because they have to be approved by our partner validating university partnership, it's not as straightforward as it might necessarily be. But the first step to do is actually to approach either ways myself or Sue, so that we can review their CV with them and see if they can become a supervisor and apply to become one straight away, or if they might need to do some additional things to enable them to apply to become a supervisor. There's two levels of supervision. There's a supervisor and a principal supervisor. So you start off as a supervisor. You have to have supervised some level 7 dissertations to completion, and you have to have done some observations of some PGR meetings, so for example supervisory meetings or an upgrade meeting, and it's not onerous. You just observe them, you record the date that you observed, and that goes on your application form. You fill in the application form and you send it in with your CV, and then that goes to committee. You can apply to be a principal supervisor once you have supervised your first level 8 through to completion, and that can be an MPhil or a PhD, and at that point you can apply. So that's another form to be completed and to confirm a completion.
Okay, Simon, sticking with your faculty, you're introducing a social inclusion research institute. First of all, what is it? What's its purpose? And are there any plans to introduce more institutes in the future?
Yeah, Siri. Yeah, ask Siri. Siri will give you the answer. But no, yeah, I mean, the Social Inclusion Research Institute is sort of the first of one of 4 institutes that we're looking at. As I've maybe alluded to previously, we have this concept where we want to create a critical mass in order to create impact. And in order to create that critical mass, we've grouped that around this idea of institutes. And so really what that entails is staff who are research active, identifying that within their personal research plans, linking that to the PDRs that personal development reviews that Richard has alluded to, and then aligning that to the institute, and the institute itself being aligned to a unit within the REP, within the Research Excellence Framework. So that is essentially what it is. And in terms of, sorry, the second part of that question, wasn't there, Graham?
Are there any plans to introduce more institutes?
Yeah, so we've, as I say, we're looking at 4 subsets essentially, and the idea behind that is that this allows the breadth of the faculty to be represented within each of those institutes. How we develop them going forward is very much dependent upon how active sort of teams are, as it were. But we see those as creating impact in our community, linked back to the sort of civic mission objectives, linked back to the diversity of the student population that we have within the university, and in terms of our communities in North Wales, and ensuring that they impact on those communities for the better. It's that passionate transformation again that we were talking about earlier.
Richard, question from the audience. What incentives are there for someone to invest time in research when they've got, well, and I can talk from experience, a million other things to do while working here?
I think the incentive is that it enhances some of those things. So, for instance, you may be teaching in an area, but by researching in that area you get new knowledge, you become more expert in the area. And you may even, particularly on Alec's side, where there's engineering and so on, you may get facilities through your research which benefit the students as well as your research. So I think it's that feedback. And I think also it's what helps you is the coming in and finding out something new that you didn't know the day before. And for me, that's a real driver, and that helps me.
Sticking with you, Richard, how will people's research achievements be recognised by the university?
That's a good question. Well, I think in terms of achievements, then clearly promotion is one. So that's quite a key one. If you do a lot of research, then you can progress through the various stages of your career. So you get paid more. That's quite critical.
Sue, can I ask you another question from the audience? How would someone go about recruiting PhD students to supervise? Or even Mandy, if you want to comment on that question.
Yeah, it's mixed actually, because I publish a lot in psychology of religion, so I find people approach me because they've read something I've written, it interests them, and they approach me and say, I'm thinking of doing a PhD in this area. I'm talking with a lady at the moment who's done exactly that. And then it's a conversation to decide whether we want to work together, and then whether she wants to register for a PhD. So I think it's getting your name out there in part as well, and that's important. And one of the rewards, I think, which I was saying about promotion internally, but also there's the external facing stuff you get to do as a researcher, which also brings its own rewards. So you get invited to present at conferences and to be a keynote speaker, and people will approach you afterwards, I'm thinking of doing research in this area, can I talk to you about it? And it starts that conversation, and that's one way in which you can recruit students. And the other way is obviously that we have open evenings and those kind of more traditional in-house methods. But I think for that good that good match between student and supervisor, that way seems to me to be the most effective.
Okay.
And then you get both parties being very interested in what's going on, what's being researched. And as a supervisor, it's a privilege because you learn so much through supervising. You gain a lot from it. They become the experts, which is a wonderful thing.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sue, do you want to add anything to that?
I can add to that. I think we're thinking about strategically recruiting PhD students, and it comes to developing expertise in particular areas. So we're trying to raise the visibility and impact of our research so that we're known for expertise in particular areas, and then we can attract students to those areas, which will then feed through to recruitment of undergraduate students, because we'll be known for our research, because that's the thing that students are interested in. We're interested in what do we do, how do we make a difference to society, and that will hopefully attract students.
And what strategies just to both of you, Alec, what strategies are in place to grow research in your faculty?
Well, just following on from what Sue was saying, one of them is partnering, so strategic partnerships, and it's the same in Simon's faculty. It's really clear thinking about who are the key players out there who are looking at us and want to work with us, and who are we looking at and want to work with. And we've managed to reduce a number of funded PhD research studentships through that process. So, for example, we're working with TPAUB, which is a contemporary art space in Wrexham, on a PhD project which is looking at communities and the way that the cultural centre in a town is absolutely fundamental to so many different things. We know that, but the PhD is providing the evidence to demonstrate that. The latest one is with Theatre Clwyd, with a similar setup, a PhD between the two of us, where we know certain good things happen, and in that sort of cultural setting, but the PhD is there to demonstrate the evidence of how that's working and how that can be maybe replicated in other areas. And there are other examples. So there's a strategy there to do with collaboration, being effective with the amount of funds that there are available, and working with like-minded people. And that's a very good strategy. I think that's building a collaboration. It actually works against this feeling of the finding from the Wellcome Trust survey, this word stifling, which is an awful sensation. And if research does one thing, it's an antidote to that, because it turns you back onto something. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great thing, and that's key to the strategy, really.
And the Faculty of Social and Life Sciences, Mandy and Simon, why is research development so important?
Might just be worth mentioning on the back of what Alec was saying about knowledge transfer partnerships as well, because they can support somebody to do an MPhil, and that's what the student working both with the university and with a partner, with usually a business, and they spend so many days a week with us and so many days a week in that partnership, and that gives the student a really good rounded experience, and also gives them a research degree. So there's those outlets as well. Okay. So yeah. So
couple more questions then. There's an anonymous question. I don't know who wants to take this. Maybe go straight to the top with Richard. It's an anonymous question from a member of staff. The vibes I get here are research is not as important as teaching. Is this true?
I think not. No, I think...
Well, based on what we've been talking about last hour, probably not. But do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. So I think that historically we've been very strong on teaching. But I think as we go forward, research is becoming more and more important. It defines what a university is, and I think the research culture is growing. I think one of the things to point out about the recruitment of students is that actually half of our students are members of staff who want to take their career forward. So they've come in, been professionals in their own disciplines, and then moved into university and want to get that research experience. So the research capacity of the university is growing through that, and quite quickly.
So the kind of big question that is on everyone's lips, the question that we've been leading up to for the past hour or so, is how do we stand? What's next? And what's the time frame?
Okay, so the metrics that I talked about earlier, we need to hit for 3 years. So
What was the starting point?
we can define our own starting
Oh, right,
point.
okay.
So, but we need to show that we've done this consistently. It's not a flash in the pan, and that suddenly everything's going to fall apart. So we've been looking at the metrics for some years now in the research office. We keep an eye on them every year. There's been a survey go out, and so last year and the year before, we just about made it through. So we were just over the edge. And so the key question has been, how have we done this year with COVID and all the other things that have distracted us? And the answer is, we've actually done significantly better. So we're significantly over the metrics that we need.
How big an impact on this process was or has COVID been?
COVID has made it very difficult for people to do research. Certainly practical facilities, it's made it very difficult, but people have turned their attention to other things. In engineering, for instance, more modelling than practical work and so on. So they've worked around it. And obviously there have been huge pressures on people putting their teaching online. It's been a hard time for everybody. So I'd been expecting that probably we wouldn't hit the metrics, but we have, and it appears we've done quite well. So the next stage is that clearly this has to go through committee. Everything in the university does.
Yeah.
So we will take this forward in the summer once we've got everything sorted out, and then we will expect that this will finally go to the Board of Governors, because any decision for a university to apply isn't my decision. It's not academic board's decision, it's the Board of Governors' decision, and the application comes from the Board of Governors. So we're looking to take it forward to them. And then after that, we can expect that it would go to Privy Council. That they then talk to Welsh Government, and then the Quality Assurance Agency will send reviewers in to triangulate what we've said and to make sure that everything is what we claimed.
Brilliant. Okay, before we wrap up, head of each each faculty, Simon, anything you want to add or say at the end?
Gosh, no, other than to maybe say about the opportunity question that you asked previously, Graham, and opportunities to participate and be involved in research is highly important. If people are interested in that, do come forward and talk to us, and we'll try and help them to help themselves in terms of how they organise themselves and their time, and the networks that they're part of. Those networks are so important.
Alex, same question to you. Anything you want to add at the end?
Well, I believe the main reason that we're here is for the students, and I believe that they are fundamental to the future, and we need to start we need to start seeing them as producers of knowledge as opposed to consumers of knowledge. And alongside the research enhancement associates, I see a future which has student researcher enhancement associates, or whatever you want to call them, alongside. Now that's happening to an extent, because I've used examples of student-led research in a number of seminars where the students themselves have produced an artifact or a product or a process in conjunction with the researcher. So I think we can start to maybe feel more confident about foregrounding the students as producers.
Great, okay. Anything you want to add to that, Richard?
No, except that I think we need to develop the research culture, but develop the right research culture in the sense that we shouldn't be pressurising people to produce a set number of papers, a large number of papers per year. It's got to be a culture which is not like the one that the Wellcome Trust found when it surveyed researchers, but one that's a positive experience that makes people want to do research and then grows the university.
Well, there's just to wrap up, there's 4 words that popped up a lot in the past hour, and they were dynamic, sustainability, ethical, and community, which are all great words. So thank you very much, Alex Shepley, Sue Liggett, Richard Simon and Mandy, and that wraps up this session of part of the Staff Springboard Conference here at Glyndwr University, all about research. And I'm sure all of our panel will be happy to answer any questions you subsequently think of via email. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.